the pool and the premises, and there was no body, or the young lady was not found in the premises or in the pool. I then saw a report from the police, a release from the police, which spoke about checking the pool and the premises since last night, and then saying this: the command center in Regional Division Number 3 was contacted and viewed footage showed that Adriana entered a red and black Ram motor car bearing registration number PSS 4684, which drove off in an eastern direction heading towards Vredenhoek. Now, if they have that footage, the police, and they put it in a statement here, they should immediately release the footage. I don't know why there is a delay in releasing this footage, because this is very inconsistent with the entire story. If you viewed footage that showed the young lady entering into a car, you gave a specific car number and the color and the make of the car, and it drove off. Then release the footage that you viewed. We want to see it too, as a country. And the family would want to see that too. How, after this person left, well, this young lady left, did her body return to the pool? Something is wrong. And we have to get to the bottom of this. And we're not going to rest until that happens. And whoever is culpable, if there is a cover-up, people will face consequences. We're not going to tolerate this. This young girl should have never lost her life. And as the president said, there'd be a thorough investigation, and wherever we find transgressions, there will be consequences at every level. At every level. We saw another incident where an individual who was on remand for assaulting his wife, he got bail after attending court, and then he killed his wife and several family members, and then committed suicide. And I want to again express on behalf of the People's Progressive Party sincere condolences to the La Cruz family for this senseless loss again. I hope that in the investigations that will follow, we will get answers here too, because this person who committed suicide, who got bail for assaulting, and I gather it was brutal assault of his wife before, he used a firearm to kill the La Cruz family, or members of the La Cruz family. So we have to find out. I haven't heard as yet from the police whether this is an illegal firearm or if it's a legal firearm. Because if he had a legal firearm, after the assault, you're supposed to lodge the firearm. He should not have been in possession of the firearm. So it will be very interesting to see if this is a legal firearm, why it was not lodged. Because the moment that that happens, then the police will take away your firearm if they were accused or charged for assault. So we will look at this matter too. But we all have to come together as a country when we have these senseless loss of life of our people. And sometimes it's hard to avoid this because you don't know of people's state of mind. But nothing justifies taking people's lives. Nothing does that. And therefore, our country is poorer when we lose our citizens, particularly in this manner. There should be a thorough investigation also of these killings. Last week, I spoke of several ideas that we intend to pursue in the next 5 years. And I urge people to send in their thoughts on these and other issues. We shared with them a number, and we asked them to send in WhatsApp messages and also to submit any ideas they have in writing. And so we've received in writing over 100 different submissions and about 1,500 on WhatsApp so far. But not 1,500 suggestions, runs into thousands, just that 1,500 different persons took the time to share their ideas. And I want to thank them for the effort that they took in sharing their ideas. We remain open to additional ideas, and we hope that people will share these. Whether they reside abroad or in Guyana, it doesn't matter. We appreciate them sharing their thoughts. A number of people ask questions of us. So some shared ideas, and their ideas range across almost every area of national life. And also they cover international trade, foreign relations, the economy, and then some very practical issues like garbage collection and cleaning of drains and doing pastures in different areas for cattle, or focus on some specific issues. So some were broader policies and some very specific ideas that address problems that people face. But many used the opportunity they had in contacting us to ask questions. And so I want to assure people again, I want to respond to some of the questions that they posed, because I thought we had done so already, addressing some of these issues. So for example, people ask, will the next 5 years see an increase in old age pension again? We know you have double old age pension, but will the next 5 years, can our pensioners see an increase? And the answer is yes. So please don't, you can submit it if you wish, but you can submit other ideas too. You don't have to resubmit that, because the answer is yes, and significantly. Will the children grant or the Because We Care grant increase from 50,000? It was 0 when we got into office, it's 50,000. The answer is yes, and it will increase significantly. So you don't need to really submit this as an idea again, because it will happen. A lot I find a lot of the ideas around these issues. Then will we reduce taxes on vehicles in the next term in office? The answer is yes. We said that already. We lowered the taxes in this term. It didn't go because we still have this issue of overcrowding on our roads, but we've made it clear that we will do so in the next term. And that includes, let me answer this, because about 50 persons asked whether it's on double cab pickup too. The answer would be yes. So we don't need that again as another idea because it will happen. NIS pension. NIS pension did not increase at the same rate as the old age pension. As I explained, we had issues at NIS. They were paying out more in contributions than they were receiving. They're paying out more in benefits than they were receiving contributions. And therefore, the solvency of the fund was at stake. We are committed to putting money into the NIS to ensure that NIS remains solvent and being able to pay its benefits to its contributors into eternity, well, into the long run. So we've done that already. We put in $10 billion to help those who are not receiving the old age, the pension, who didn't qualify for it. And I explained last week that we are going to be increasing our contributions from the Treasury to the NIS in direct transfers, not through payment for public sector employees, but through direct transfers, so they can increase the NIS pension in the future. But that will mean direct cash, large cash injections into the NIS to do that, and we're committed to doing that. So the answer is yes there again. That will happen. Public service pay increases. Will there be that? Yes, and significantly. That will happen. We have already, a lot of suggestions came about investing in recreational and sports facilities, and we are committed to doing this. We've made it clear that every ground across the country on the coast will be developed as recreational areas, and then for sports, including with pavilions and lights, every single one in every community. Already we've started that process in Georgetown. All 34 would be done. I've explained this numerous times. In Berbice, 125. In the Amerindian communities, we are even moving to put in lights in some, but it's harder there because they're not connected to the grid, but definitely the upgrade of those grounds. And we've given 2 years in a row subventions to the villages to do that, and I suspect when the two shows come again, they will get more subvention to keep upgrading all of these sporting facilities and recreational facilities in their villages. So that will be done. So the suggestions around these areas are good, and they're already part of our plan to continue to address these in the next term. A lot had to do with drainage and irrigation and flood control, a lot of the suggestions. And so I had explained at length our plans for managing water, flood control and water management along the coast in particular, the big investments that we are making in the Hope-like canals that will drain both communities and also farmlands, but would allow us to better manage water through these areas. The huge number of fixed pump stations and mobile pumps that we're acquiring so that we have a capacity along the coast that should we have flooding in any area, we can swiftly move the mobile pumps into those areas and get the water out. All of those investments are being made. And it would run into maybe $1 billion, close to $1 billion, of which the bulk of it will come from the LCDS resources that we've garnered. But I think people want not just to hear about those, they want to hear about internal drains. So this, because we got a lot of comments about the internal drains. So they were, for example, saying what would happen in internal drains. Like in the city, we also have major problems here. So the focus in the next term will be a lot on internal drains, but also putting in concrete drains in many of the communities. That's the next focus. Like how we focus in this term a lot on community roads right across the country. So a lot would be on community drainage in the next term, because we need to do that. A lot of those drains, internal drains, are blocked up. If you go around the city, we help in the city now because the city council does absolutely nothing in terms of drainage. So every year the public works would give out hundreds of contracts for people to clean the internal drains. Up to a couple of days ago, we spoke with Minister Ejel. Actually, it was yesterday, and they're going to do that again throughout the city and many other communities to do internal drains, desiltings, etc. But the more structural work would have to be done too, because a lot of the drains are blocked up. People have filled their, like if they built a bridge, they've just solid cast the bridge there, and so you don't have, the water doesn't flow easily. Here in central Georgetown, you see it, and many communities. So we'd have to do major restructuring to get this done, but that's part of the plan too. So I can understand it, the concerns, because I see a lot of it came in the suggestions that we had about internal drains. And if you listen to me, whenever I've gone out a lot, and I spoke of it here again, the president has spoken about it, the ministers, we have increased the subvention to the NDCs. We have given almost every one of the local government bodies in the country a mini excavator for them to get focus on internal drains and to clear these as a priority focus. But the more sustained work would have to be done in the future through putting in concrete drains that can easily be desilted, and you don't have the same vegetation, overgrowth of vegetation, which chokes up these internal drains. This is a major issue, and it came up a lot in the suggestions too. So I want to assure people, we've been talking about this, we've already started working, but it would be significant sort of investment in the next term in this. Garbage collection and garbage disposal. Major issue for us as a country. I want to return to this issue and talk about the city and the pileup of garbage and what we'll do about it. But for the country, we're talking about building several in almost all the communities, or at least in every NDC, to have an area where they can dispose of garbage away from the communities, and also to build their capacity to collect and transport the garbage to these facilities. We've started off by giving tractors and trailers, but now we're evolving this year. We're going to buy a number of compactors for these communities, starting with the most populous ones and the tongues, the 10 tongues across the country. We can start with those and giving them more compactors so they can easily collect more garbage and dispose of it. And through this subvention, higher subvention, which we've started giving, they'll be able to operate these facilities, to find drivers and gasoline, etc. Because that's normally the problem with many of these local government bodies. They don't have the funds to operate the equipment to collect garbage. So this is part of the plan. We already have started rolling it out. It will be rolled out in earnest in the next 5 years. So I can understand this preoccupation of so many people because they see this is a pressing problem now, but that will be addressed. The investment in more parking spaces. And this is vital, not only to get the trucks off the road and off people's parapets, so that's why we're building these government facilities where you can go and park for a fee if you're a businessman and you have trucks and heavy duty equipment, etc. You can be parking them by the roadside. So, but we're working at that, but also parking for people. And so in the city, we're going to be focusing heavily on the concrete drains, but also on upgrading between the edge of the road and the drain wall, the curb wall, because now it's mud all over the place. So most likely these will be done with the concrete pavers. So you allow some vegetation to go through, but you have hard surfaces throughout the city, apart from the investment in, like what we have done on the railway embankment. You have additional parking there and many parts of the city. This will go all the way to Kitty. We're thinking about 10,000 parking places, spaces for people in Georgetown. And that would be, and we can achieve this easily if we upgrade parapets on the roads and stuff. So people, if they come off the road slightly, they still have a hard surface on which to go. It's part of our plan in Georgetown and part of the beautification plan too for the city, but not just trees, but also upgrading parapets. And it's not just a Georgetown plan, it's for the country. So this is a really good suggestion, and a number of people, we appreciate the ideas too, because they just don't mention parking, but they're also suggesting solutions behind it. We can't put all of that in the manifesto, but definitely I can assure you that this is a priority focus for the future. And then better zoning, that is another suggestion. So I want to tell you the conversation that we've had with several people in community meetings. Now, a lot of people they have a workshop in a village. They've probably had that for a long time, say welding or spray painting, or they're processing some, maybe fish or something. But right now, the communities are growing and people are intolerant to that sort of thing. And so the people who are running these small operations or small businesses, they want more space and they want to move out. So how do we help them to move these commercial ventures? And a lot of this happened because of the lack of zoning in the past. There used to be a time when you zone areas. So in Queenstown, you couldn't put a commercial facility. But then all of that, in the tough years, everything fell apart. And so we are thinking about how do we help those business owners to expand their business, but not do so and harm people in the villages or the wards in the city. So this is why a series of, in the backlands of the villages, we're thinking about creating some small parks, not the big ones like we're doing at Enmore that would have like hundreds of businesses. That's a huge industrial area, or that would create thousands of jobs for people on the East Coast. One is being built there, but that's a massive one. But these small commercial type facilities or parks at the back of the villages and in parts of the city where people can go and group their businesses there. So it's not going to affect people in their homes. This is an idea we've been toying toying with for a long time, and I think the time has come that we start exploring it, because even the people who are reluctant to move out, sometimes the business owners don't want to move out, they complain. Now they are seeing the benefit of doing that because they need to grow their businesses. And so they can't do that with a neighbor. I was in Clombrook, and people complain there, Ansgrove, Clombrook, and last Sunday I went to about 11 villages and talked to people, just drop in an impromptu way and talk to people, and it was a big complaint. People, mining sheep, in 70 heads of sheep next door to the neighbor. That's a major environmental problem. You can imagine the smell and stuff like that. People are complaining about it. So this sort of thing is, I guess, people are concerned about it, and therefore from an environmental perspective, we have this in many parts of. That's why they sent in these ideas. A lot places of worship, they want free water and electricity. Well, we can do. I think the free water up to a limit they're already getting, and the electricity, I think we can put a cap to, because you don't want people to be, everything they start renting out the place to, and then get, the bill would go high. So I think it's a good idea, and there's a sympathy in the government for that sort of thing. A lot of suggestions about how we can improve efficiency of delivery of health care and the focus on management. Tons of suggestions there, like literally hundreds. And also about digitization of the public service, something we spoke of already as part of our plans for the future. But people want a greater comfort from less hassle in accessing public service now. And they want to do so from their homes, etc. We already signal, like in the next term, pensions could be paid through maybe your bank account. People can be able to open that. The same thing with public assistance, etc. So a lot of that will happen, but that was it. Will the cash grant continue? The answer is yes. The cash grant, we had various suggestions about how much, the magnitude, but I can assure you that it will continue, and it's not a one-off thing. About school feeding, transportation for school kids, we are looking at that seriously, how we can help with this. We already signaled that we want to absorb more costs that parents have to pay to educate their children. And the costs now, we're taking over almost tuition costs at every level, writing exams. Now we have to look at what additional costs. So definitely on the school feeding program, expanding that so that the kids can get more meals in school the next term. The transportation, it's a dicey thing with these big buses back on the road and stuff like that. Or it could work through that way, or alternately giving the parent maybe some more subvention through the Because We Care grant to help to offset transportation costs to school for their children. So not necessarily reintroducing the big bus, but we're thinking about it seriously. There are lots of suggestions. Development of investment vehicles. A lot of people commented on the ideas we floated about shares underwritten and with guaranteed return on those shares, and guaranteed dividends paid on those shares. Or bonds for ordinary people. They like the ideas, so they shared a lot of suggestions. They talk about a junior stock exchange. A whole range of things came up, and how more and more of the lucrative government opportunities we can put into vehicles that people can invest in, Guyanese can invest in. Development financing is a big issue. We knew that before. We said we'll do it, a development financing institution for small business, but for many others. And that's there. More lands for small farmers. I dealt with that at the last time. This land for small miners, innovation hubs, several ideas on taxation, support for livestock, all of these came in. So we know now from the suggestions that the things we are talking about are on the right track. Because, and the reason we are on the right track is because we are a party that listens to people. All through the four and a half years, we are listening. So we know what affects them most, and that's why we can reflect these as part of our program. So we are not too far off. And a lot of thing about people wanting their own home. That's why we're now suggesting subsidizing rent, like the PNC is. Nobody approaches you. When I go to Starbucks or anywhere else, people say, I want to own my home. I don't want government help to rent. Nobody says that. I want a piece of land. I want to get some assistance to build my home. That is what people are talking about, and that is what we intend to do. So because we're that connected, these are just some of the numerous ideas that we've been having. And I just wanted to give the country a feedback as to what's coming in, so that they too can participate in this process of sharing their thoughts. But you don't need, if I mention some of these again already, then they're going to be part of the program. You don't need to focus on them, maybe on additional ideas. But if you want to, nobody is preventing you. If you want to, feel free to do it still. We don't want to truncate the enthusiasm that we have witnessed in the past week. I think it's commendable, and that people are participating, and not a single negative. That's why I like thousands of suggestions, but people just focus on changing lives to the better. So I wanted to talk a bit about garbage in the city. And the city council gets a free pass from everyone, particularly places like the Starbuck News, which I thought would have been more balanced. You will get a free pass from Gordon Mosley and some outfits because they're pro-APNU. But at least the Starbuck News now will never really ask the tough questions of the city council. And it's a failure of the PNC. If you want to see how the PNC and AFC manage things, the city is a microcosm of their management style. They failed at the national level, and we've witnessed that in their planning efforts, or their lack of planning, and the mediocre policies that they put in place, and the consequences of those mediocre, unsustainable policies led to the financial ruin of our country. They were so unsustainable that they led to a massive accumulation of debt because they had to be financed. And so people think we are far away from their management style. Just look to the city council. Every cent of revenue that they collect, it goes, you don't know where it really goes, because they're not building roads, which is their responsibility. The central government has taken over road construction in the city. And every road is being done, and every one that has not been done, I met with community groups in Georgetown over the last couple of days, and every road that has not been done will be done, because we promised this at local government elections. So we've taken over roads. We spent $1 billion between last year and the rollover from this year for the Hogs Bush, upgrading Hogs Bush. So take garbage out of the city. Remember, we built that. You had a dump site in the city. We moved it out of the city. We spent $1 billion there. We're awarding contracts to clear the internal drains in the city. They don't focus on that too. So absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing they were supposed to do is to pick up the garbage and take it to the dump site, because nothing else they don't focus on. No other service. We've taken over the health the recreational facilities. I told you we're doing all of them in the city, upgrading everyone, all 34. We're now putting in parks in the city. If you go on the seawall, they upgrade almost everything in the city. The entire beautification program, the new parks, parking space, etc. Billions of dollars invested in the city. Nothing from the city hall. They collect a substantial sum of money. So they are very selective. They claim they don't have money. That's every time they claim they don't have money. But they don't have accounts, proper audited accounts. So they will not even prepare the financial statements so you can audit how much they collect and how much they expended and what they expended it on. Because if you don't have audited statements, you don't know that. You can't verify, not just collection, but you can't verify your expenditure and whether it was dedicated to a useful purpose. So that's not happening. And they have a small account. We can do it for the whole country, prepare the accounts and have them audited. They can't do it there. That's typical PNC style. And therefore, let me give you an example. So under APNU, they put in a container fee. So you have to pay $5,000 for every container that's landed here. The money is collected every month. The Shipping Association writes a check to the City Hall between 25 to 30 million. I was talking to the Private Sector Commission, and they told me $25 to $30 million over 9 years now. So they've collected over $2 billion from just that fee that they introduced. But you don't hear anything about it. 9 years now, they've been collecting it. They introduce on the APNU. Every month they get $25 to $30 million in a check. That's $300 million. Just like that. You don't even hear about it. I'm not even sure it's reflected in the accounts. When I heard of it, I'm surprised. I have to ask our counselors to see, because if you don't have audited statements, we don't know where it's going. This is a huge problem. So now we have this big pileup of garbage in the city. They know it's election time, so they just leave everything on the street. They just leave it, hoping to create dissent, like what they were trying to do by trying to increase valuation now for properties in Georgetown, so people end up paying higher rates of taxes before the elections. And you know who they would blame? The PPP. Everything is PPP. So they would go around in the communities and say it's a PPP's problem. Then when they failed at that, they tried to make it look like they were trying to help the residents of Georgetown by waiving the interest on fees. And it was a scam. We had to put a stop to it. So every day, the residents of Georgetown must think about it, that you have the PNC, AFC running City Hall. They're a failure. They've been a failure at the national level. They're a failure there too. They complain about everything. They're not accountable. They don't focus on the citizen. And had it not been for central government massive injection into the city, this would have been a very different place. So the president we can't allow the city to deteriorate, even the garbage. We're going to focus on upgrading roads, parking, everything else, lighting in the city. I told you that we're purchasing 100,000 lights. We announced it 2 years ago that once we get closer to the completion of the gas to energy project, we will put in these lights across the country, in the city too. We are procuring 100,000 lights, so street lights would get going everywhere. All of that would be done by the central government. However, we can't allow this state, Georgetown, to be in this messy state. And the president has just put together a task force comprising members of the public sector and private sector, including civil society, to tackle this problem. We'd have to do it even if they don't collaborate, because they don't collaborate with anything that is positive. They always come up with negative issues there. We'll have to do it on our own, just clean up the city. And so that task force will start working shortly. The president has already put it together. We can't allow the city to deteriorate. That's what they would like to see happen, so then they can go and blame the government or the PPP. I spoke about the Le Repentier Cemetery some time back. I'm pleased to say I spoke with Edge Hill, and already, I think 60 contracts, small contracts, have been awarded to upgrade the roads. We do the drainage, then you would have lights in the cemetery so people can drive through. And then hopefully, we can do other things to upgrade the cemetery, plant some trees and into that area. It's a major issue for tons of people. I told you I did not realize how much people related to that, because tens of thousands of Guyanese have one of their relatives buried there, and they just can't access. They don't have any way of visiting or anything else, and we recognize that because we've listened to people, and that's why it's being done there. I want to talk a bit about on Monday we tabled a piece of legislation that I promised a while back. It has to do with giving us the tool to address comprehensively the cause and the consequences of any oil spill we may have. So there has been a public debate for a while about the adequacy of the insurance to cover oil spill. First, the Exxon has $600 million of insurance. That's the first line. Then a $2 billion parent company guarantee. And there's been controversy whether that should have been capped and it's adequate. And then, of course, recourse to the assets of the company, which is substantial now. 10 billion, maybe over that, of billions of dollars, US dollars of assets for the company. So this is how you approach it. We thought it necessary to make the perpetrator or the company responsible for any oil spill in our country, particularly in our territorial sea and exclusive economic zone, responsible for the cleanup and the consequences of including people, disruption to people's economic activity. And so we promised to pass this legislation. We've been working on it for a while. We're ready to table it on Monday. So the law will broaden the scope to include companies transiting our waters, that is vessels, because we did not have a law covering a spill caused by, say, a maritime, a tanker coming to collect oil here. We were focused only on the environmental permits for the operators and those who are in the oil and gas sector, from the production perspective. But the transport, there was no coverage. But now the new law will give us that coverage, so we can hold responsible not just those who produce petroleum, but also those who transport it, should there be a spill caused by either of the two parties. So that the first thing is that it expands the coverage. Second is that it holds them responsible. So there's no cap on the liability, because you're responsible for cleaning up the spill and you're responsible for the losses caused by to the country and to people. So in the law, we build in almost like a mediation mechanism where people there would be a board established with 2 persons from the government and 1 from the responsible party, and they can resolve if there is a claim that could be resolved there, but it's not binding on either of the parties. It doesn't take away their right to go to the High Court of Guyana to seek recompense. So they can choose to bypass that mechanism and go directly to the High Court. Say a fisherman is affected, they can go directly to the High Court, or they can go to the board. Should the board come up with, say, making a recommendation and all the parties agree to that, then it becomes binding. Should either of the party not agree, then it's not binding, they still can go to the High Court. So we put in place a mechanism in the law, or the proposed law, that will allow people to seek recompense should they have any economic loss. And of course, the company would have to be responsible for cleaning up the damage caused. So it's a very important part of what we promised. Remember, we promised to improve the entire framework for managing the oil and gas sector. We will come back in the new term on some more qualitative issues. But right now, this term, given what we inherited from APNU. APNU had a 1986 law that they were still using to govern the petroleum sector. It had nothing to do, it didn't have the scope to manage a modern era oil and gas industry. We updated that now. We passed a new law. We expanded its scope and gave ourselves more tools to hold the companies responsible for a work plan, etc., and safety and safety of operations. So that was one major achievement of the government. The second was the local content law, which saw thousands of Guyanese companies, literally over 1,000 Guyanese companies benefiting now. Second thing we passed. Then the new PSA that we passed, the old PSA had a 2% royalty, we increased that to 10%. Zero tax, income tax, we increased that to 10% too. And we reduced the 75% settlement to go to cost recovery down to 65%. And instead of ring fencing, we just decided that we will auction smaller blocks in the future. So we changed that substantially in the new PSA. And then we put some huge fees, of course, signing bonuses for you if you get a new block, and then also penalties for not complying with your work program. That is financial penalties in those. That's major. That's major, and we got that done. So that was the third element of the framework. First was the new law. Second, the local content law. Third was the new PSA. The fourth, we went to auction, but then we realized that because we didn't have the first two elements at that time, that is the two pieces of legislation, and we didn't have seismic. So we had to auction the blocks as is, where is. So whatever information we had. That is why we went to tender. We're now in the process of concluding, hiring companies to shoot seismic data for all of the outstanding areas that we have available. So the next time we go to an auction, we'll have seismic data, which would make the auctions much more, hopefully, interesting to people, because then they can buy the data from the data banks and then review those, and then on that basis put in their bids at the auction. So that's will happen in the new term. Then we upgraded the NRF to put in a penalty for non-disclosure, 10 years jail term for the Minister of Finance, or non-disclosure of receipts. That's unheard of anywhere in the world. And then we strengthen the entire process for managing petroleum reserves and the transparency surrounding the process, so that every cent will have to be appropriated. We remove a direct charge from the consolidated fund that APNU had, not on the consolidated fund, but from the petroleum fund that APNU had, that they could have charged expenditure directly to the fund. We said, no. You have to appropriate it first. It has to go through Parliament before you can utilize any money from the fund. You can't go and charge the expenditure directly to the fund, which they had. And so once it goes to Parliament, you know it has to be on a piece of paper. Everyone has to debate it so the country knows. So a lot of that has happened, and we intend to move further to refine. So building capacity, now monitoring a lot more. The headquarters would be built soon. We already have a feed to the dashboard that Exxon has now that shows real-time operations offshore, what's happening there, production, etc. We have to build an independent capacity in government. And among the young people we're training, there are lots of young people in that ministry now who are several are undergoing training in different areas, that they'll be able to productively have a second look at all of these things. So we better manage the sector in the future. And of course, to look at how we can get greater income from different areas. The next term we'll return in earnest to try to monetize the gas so that we can bring more money to our people and to our country, which we've already moved on, and at least we've laid out the strategic vision for how it should be accomplished. So a lot of those things, I saw some of the suggestions that came in, and they are along the similar lines that we've outlined. But I want people to understand what we had to do now in these 4.5, 5 years, is to create a modern menu of tools to manage the sector and to tilt the balance away from the oil and gas company in favor of Guyana. With the new PSA, we did that. With the new Petroleum Activities Act, we did that by giving us more tools to manage safety features. They have to pay more money too for those measures. And then, of course, the local content law that still shifted things in our favor. So the French companies can't come here anymore, or Trinidadian companies, and do basic stuff as they were doing on the APNU, supplying cleaning services or food or water or security services or renting buildings or transport services. That's reserved entirely for our people, Guyanese. That's reserved entirely. We've tilted that balance in favor of our people. And that's why it's a substantial sum of money. It's 700 odd million US dollars of spending on those things. Well, those and some other things that Exxon had to spend giving the business to local companies. So a lot of that, including the recruitment. If you can't qualify, some of the companies were trying to dodge that. Some of the big companies, by not putting their expats on the payroll, they're bringing them in as consultants and not putting them on the line position. And recently we closed that loophole. So you can't qualify for the local content law unless you truly have local people, and 75% have to be in Guyanese in management positions. They have to be Guyanese in management positions, and then I think it's 90 or 95% in the other positions in the company. So it's not just we're fetching the water in the company, we also can manage these companies, etc. Because too often that's what the foreign companies try to do, get us to fetch water and stuff like that. We're not into that business. So that has restructured the entire approach. Now, the companies have to come to us and submit a plan to show how they would hire local people. And they have to go to the local content secretariat and say, we want to hire these guys, but we have to, they would say, advertise first in Guyana. You have to advertise, or if only if we don't have a Guyanese with a comparable skill, you get to do that. So it's a big change a lot. So a big focus on that in the future too, but we have more tools now to better manage the sector. And that's what we've systematically put in place. And now with the last one piece that will go in, now will be the one to manage just in case we have a disaster. We're hoping we don't have, but we have better tools to tackle that. And we can hold people responsible for that. I know what a lot of suggestions came in on two things too. Children and animals. And so I want to say to the people who have been advocating this, that focus on this, that it's a priority, stray animals and all of that. So a number of NGOs have been doing really good work. The Guyana Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and several other NGOs. Last year I met them before the budget, and they showed us the work they have done through various initiatives. And the First Lady has been supporting in a major way some of these initiatives to deal with strays by neutering, sparing them, and generally to raise awareness about how to treat pets, etc. So the subvention that the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was about 700,000 per year. So that was last year. This year, it's gone to 15 million. So we're increasing this, and they said we can do much more work now with this, and they would work with the other NGOs. So last year, we met before the budget. I met with all of them because they asked to meet when we had the consultation in the zoo for the botanical garden, the upgrade process. And we met and we work at this. So we are prepared to support them and any other group that will address this issue, because it's it is sometimes a major problem in some communities, the strays and all of these things. And a lot of these people have been doing really good work, but I think they have been underfunded. And so we are hoping to correct that. We started this year and we're hoping to do that. And then, you know, ChildLink and Blossom Inc. Blossom Inc. These are two NGOs that have received substantial subventions increase since we got into office, because they do a lot of work with children, like the child advocacy centers. They do their forensic interview for children who are abused. They offer counseling. They're there to work with people, you know, follow the case through the court, etc. They've been doing like hundreds of interviews, literally, when kids are abused. So we've been working with them too, apart from the expansion of the program under the Child Care and Protection Agency. So these NGOs of that nature. I think people were asking about that. Would they get more help from government? And we said, our answer is yes. Once they do something that is useful to our society, and particularly in relation to our children, then they can count on the full support of the government, now and in the future. So I just wanted to address those issues. So I see, you know, a couple of weeks ago I addressed this issue when Stabrook had this really good editorial about a cultural policy. And I said the cultural policy and one of its central tenets that they argued for in the editorial was the building of a positive outlook on about your country, and is a positive national consciousness. And I thought it's a great thing, because I've seen some countries who are worse off than Guyana, where people don't have jobs. Here or anything else, they're declining. They still are positive about their country. And then I argued that a newspaper like that, you know, that sits in the middle, or should sit in the middle, you know, they should actually help the process along. And you can help the process along by being what you advocate for, which is balanced and truthful, and also positive about good things that happen to our country and our people. And then I used the Amerindian community as an example. I said, several times now, we've had several engagements with the two shows. I'm not going to go back over the long history and about the progress that Amerindians made in Guyana from the days of exclusion, absolute exclusion in the early 90s, because I know I was Minister of Finance at that time, to where they are today. And I'm not going to trace the entire period of progress in communities or the inclusion or rights agenda or everything else. I'm not going to do that today. I will just go to last year's example of the NTC. And if you check the same Stabrook News, you will see that for the 5 days that the two shows stayed in Georgetown, we had 242 villages, two shows, senior councils, right, every head of CDCs in Amerindian communities, all here, all positive, happy that we're talking about grounds in their communities or a new grant. Some of them got 34 million. The lowest got, I think, 14 million from a LCDS grant, doing large number of projects, everything, healthcare, etc. They chose in those 5 days not to reflect a single one of the other two shows or a positive view about what was happening in their villages. And the conference was entirely positive. They had the APA guy, 1-2 show, and every day he was in the media running down the government or the other two shows, making them look like, they're doing something wrong. And then the same guy showed up there and collected the LCDS money for his village that he was opposed to in the newspapers in Starbuck News. So how can you portray the changes that we're taking? No, I've never seen in any country. You show me which country in the world, developed and developing country, where the indigenous communities are making such rapid progress. I would tell you not a single country that I can think of. I'm not using indigenous people for today. But no, it's negative. So again, in the last week, again, they went off. I told you how the APA operates. APA is like an arm of the PNC. They collected $20 million or so over the last 10 years from abroad that they got, but didn't spend it in the communities. They spent it on conferences and wages and salaries and everything else, not on people. They have appointed themselves, not that anybody appointed them. They don't have a constituency. They appointed themselves as the conscience of these villages. And they can pronounce on what's happening even when it contradicts what all of the two shows say together collectively. So they all collectively want the LCDS and the programs arising out of them, but they don't want it. So their voice matter more than the 240 odd political the leaders of these communities. This was the same organization that's the head of that organization, Jean LaRose. In the 5 years under APNU, she became deputy head of the PNC list in 2015. The head of that organization became deputy head of the PNC list and then advisor to the APA, still remains there. Recently, Laura George, who was, I think, one of the senior officials there, resigned to join the AFC campaign. This is a PNC outfit that they were the ones when there was an assault on the Amerindian community. All the 2,000 CSOs lost their job, not a word. When APNU said, you can't get no oil money if you want more land, they didn't say a word. They didn't say a word, but in that period. Today, look, they're at the UN now talking about free prior. The government doesn't respect free prior informed consent, which is a fundamental principle under the UN conventions, that when you deal with indigenous communities, you have to get their consent. So when we go to the LCDS program, the funds there, we give the villages, they all have to have a meeting of the village, their individual village. They have to get, I think, over 60% of the villagers to attend. They send the minutes that they agree to the proposals, they bought into it, etc. They have to buy into the program through consultation at the village level. The two shows represent that. Where do they have the consent? How do they practice free prior informed consent? They don't go to the villages, but they speak on behalf of the villages and try to kill anything positive. You know what they want? They don't want is the 10 billion that has gone to these villages through the LCDS program in 2 years alone, and have funded nearly over 1,500 contracts. They don't want it to happen because it makes their party look bad, the PNC, AFC. That's what. But this week again, all you would think that the APA is a mainstream unit. They would never, Stabrook would never, ever interrogate the APA and say, what are you really doing with your money? Why don't you practice FPIC? What about these conferences? What are your salaries here in Georgetown? You're a Georgetown-based NGO. Why is it that all the other two shows don't subscribe to what you believe? And then look at the progress in the community. Just go and talk to the people. But they have a voice. And then repeat all the garbage. So this is how you build national consciousness about, positive national conferences. You undermine it. I had to come back to this today. You undermine it, and then you lecture people. You stand on a lectern, and you lecture the rest of the country about what we should do, what policy we must have. But they undermine their national consciousness. And this brings me to the next point. I don't want to deal with it. So Stabrook News says, again, countering social media. This is another editorial. I'm just moving a little organic because they're connected across. I didn't want to make it a major point. I agree that we must counter social media misinformation. It's dangerous and it's misleading, and you can have criminals mislead people too, as we've seen in this country. We've seen serious criminals misleading people by offering tokens. So you can have that, but they mention, for example, more than ever, media houses need to engage in fact-checking. This process can act as a check on information accuracy. For example, Stabrook News examined claims made by the Vice President regarding the still incomplete Bamia Primary School. So they mentioned me in the editorial since I got honorary mention there. But what was I getting at? They were not fact-checking me about Bamia. My point was not whether every classroom was functional or the step was already covered with maybe tile. My point was with Bamia that you argued, for a long time they argued that we exclude Afro-Guyanese from growing in this country. The PPP has been a humbug to Afro-Guyanese making progress in Guyana because we're racist and discriminatory. That has been their argument, the PNC, AFC, and they carry it in the newspapers here. That the moment, so this is an Afro-Guyanese company that won this bid, but suddenly they're connected to the PPP somehow. These are not card-bearing members of the PPP, hits and jam people. They're not card-bearing, but they are progressive people. They want to grow, they want to do other things. They run them down on this school more than we have around Georgetown, some big contractors right here on the coast who are doing shoddy work, who are taking long to do the work, who have not even completed work, massive contractors. Why don't you run them down? You focus all your attention on Bamia. All your attention on Bamia now because we broke the stereotype. These are young black individuals who are progressive, who are working hard in very difficult terrain there to build a school, but it breaks the stereotype that they've been trying to progress. So they have to pull it down. That is my argument against the Bamia thing. Why not focus on everybody else? So, like Bamia, why didn't focus on the 600 million that APNU disappeared from this disaster, the place where donkeys rest there all the time now. What's it called? Durban Park, yes. Durban Park, the donkeys sleeping ground there. I see a lot of donkeys in there now. So the thing is, they don't focus on that. They were running this, so they fact-checked me. They fact-checked me. So why don't they fact-check their own articles? They're lecturing social media. Now, we must fact-check social media, but you need to fact-check some of your own articles that you're writing. You know, you want to fact-check Jagdeo and Bamia? That was not my point about whether the school completed. I may have said it's based on my report, 95% completed or something like that, or 100%, what I get. But my point was different. Why don't you fact-check that? And fact-check how many Afro-Guyanese have made progress under this party. Fact-check our policies, how they're national in orientation. You wouldn't do that and compare it with APNU. Fact-check things. Fact-check your own misleading articles many, many times. And then we go on, since I'm on editorials here, another one. Why don't you fact-check this, something else too? So, the 8 subjects, payment and context, another editorial in the Starbuck News. It's almost like we can do nothing right, the PPP. So the president announced we're going to pay for all the kids. If they write CXC or CSET, we're going to pay up to 8 subjects. The country, they were negative about it. They got slaughtered on the feed. So they had to come back at it now. So, however, behind the applaud, right? This is what, because people across the board felt it's a good initiative and it's for all of our kids. It doesn't matter where you live, what race you are, whatever. You get it's for all of our children. They had to come in like Scrooge. They can't even allow one little thing to pass in favor of the government. However, behind the applause came criticism, particularly from a Starbuck News editorial that questioned the lack of procedural transparency and financial disclosure. They're the guardians now of procedural transparency and financial disclosure. Irfan Ali must not make a statement as the president until he is satisfied Starbuck News standard for transparency and financial disclosure. Even when it's good for the people of the country, all the children of our country, we must now have to check with them every time we want to pass a new policy. This is the sort of arrogance, the elitism that we've consistently have to fight against. That they believe they know better than anyone. They set the standards. I don't know who writing these editorials. And so they went on to, in particular, demand our attention, cost-benefit analysis. So they want to know how we're spending taxpayers' money. Whether I just deal with the cost-benefit analysis first. So are we getting the best return on this investment? So why don't they ask themselves that when we put the ads in the newspapers? If we do a cost-benefit analysis of the reach that we will get with putting an ad in, say, one of the mainstream newspapers, it's a fraction of what we will get from putting it on some people's pages and some of the outfits that are online, independent outfits. So shouldn't we do a cost-benefit analysis of that? But you dare to do that, they would say, we're trying to starve them of ads. When you do a cost-benefit analysis of reach versus spending. But they would do it, we must do it to decide whether we will give all the kids or pay for the 8 subjects for all the children in the country. We must do it then, but we mustn't do it when we look at the reach, that benefit of taxpayers' money. And the second one is about the acute financial health of Guyanese households. So they had to speak about President Ali again and said, oh, he's been making grand promises of transformation. So if people are so wealthy now, why do you have to do this? They should be able to afford it, because we've been saying people are growing wealthier. The fact of the matter is that we have started producing oil just a few years ago. They believe that immediately we will get, every household is wealthy. We must not speak about the progress that households are making. People are making progress in getting a piece of land, or they're building a home, or they're acquiring a vehicle. But many of them still have to get a loan because the salary is growing, and they do need, and they can fund more things from their salaries, but they have to fund much more. They have bigger obligations. So what's wrong with the government offsetting some costs that the families have to bear? But no, since you say that our households are getting more prosperous, why do you have to do this? Let them fund it themselves. It's a misrepresentation. I don't want to go into the historical changes of people's lives. The United States of America got where it is now because it grew over 200 years by maybe 1%. It's an accumulation. We came out of, in Guyana's case, in 1990, we were considered poorer than Haiti, the poorest country in this hemisphere. Today, we're there now on a per capita basis. That's why they use one of the, in fact, maybe the second highest per capita income in the hemisphere. So you have to grow out of these things. You have to grow out of them. But they abstract from all of this because President Ali speaks about transformation and prosperity. We must now stop the government talking nonsense. Because if people are prosperous, you don't have to pay for their education. As though we can get everyone immediately out of poverty. We still don't have the budget this year, all the oil money this year can only fund 37% of the budgetary expenditure. Only 37%. So where is all this sudden wealth? But because we are spreading it, it's going to be managed in a sustained way, we can point to where we're going, and we're supporting our people. If we take away the cost from the parent, yes, the wealthier man may benefit a bit more too. But then when you start doing the means test, this is precisely why Chedi Jagan removed the means test from old age pension. Because when you started doing the means test, people started cheating. They cheated. And we said across the board, if you're there, you reach 65, you get the old age pension. And it's easy now. We know that some people who are wealthier may not need it, but they're going to collect it still. They may not need it versus the guy who is poorer. But it's easier to do this across the board. And then people can't say you discriminate. If we start doing it, say only the wealthy children can, or poor children can get the 50,000 because we care again. Soon, Apple will jump immediately on it. Look, the PPP doing it, racist. It's racist. That's the first thing they would say. You know that. Whether it's true or not, that's their first line of argument. We do it across the board. Now, yeah, some parents are wealthier, but it's easier. And it's a way that we treat our children the same way. That we treat them the same way. Now, you don't have, so they mentioned about, we were subsidizing already, but it was only for disadvantaged kids. You know, a lot of those kids had to jump through hoops to get the subsidized payments for their CXC. And then some of them, because it's determined at the school level, the wealthier people got it and the poor ones didn't get it. Because, you got bias in the system. So now we remove all of that. So no school teacher can decide, you're my favorite parent, I'll give you I have 15 to give out, I'll give you the 15 people I like the most, and the others wouldn't get it, regardless of whether they need it or not. Everybody gets it now, all of them. That's what we were aiming for, to treat our people equally, everybody, and with less burden. You don't have to apply for it now. You know the government is paying. If you're doing it subject, the government just pay for it. You just, that is, every day it's a little nitpicking. They don't come up with major policies. It's like the opposition. They don't have a single policy. Every day it's about what we are not doing well, but they don't have anything. They will do it better. They didn't do it. I don't want to say the word, but anyhow, they didn't do anything. Couldn't do anything. But now suddenly they're very advanced. And so, again, everything can make it look bad. Now, I saw this thing about the report that came out from the State Department, and a big hullabaloo all week about it. And so last week, I saw the Starbuck News article, and I thought it was a good article, balanced, and I did not respond to it Thursday last, because I read the report, and I'm seeing very different things than they saw. So they pointed out to the problems. They pointed out the problems that we have, the report. Some of it may be inaccurate information, a bit unfair, but on the whole, I thought was a fairly good report. But they would choose to highlight only the negatives. So for example, so I asked my staff today to print out some of the thing from the APNU era, and you almost saw a wholesale cut and paste from the APNU period right into the 2025 report. So let me read the 2019 one. It says, Guyana National Risk Assessment 2017 found that it has a medium to high money laundering risk. Unregulated currency exchange houses and dealers in precious metals and stones pose a risk to Guyana's AML CFT system. Other sectoral vulnerabilities include the banking industry and unregulated attorneys, real estate agents, used car dealers, and charities. So a lot of that came back to the 2025 report, but mostly we'll take it in the 2025 report and post it. So it says, oh, this is PPP legacy. Historically, the primary sources of laundered funds are narcotics trafficking. This is 2019 report, and real estate fraud. However, other illicit activities, including human trafficking, gold smuggling, contraband, and tax evasion, are also sources. The licensing policies and procedures of Guyana's unsophisticated banking and financial institutions increase the risk of drug money laundering. All from 2019, common money laundering typologies include large cash deposits using fake agreements of sale for non-existing precious minerals. I wonder who they're talking about here. The cross-border transport of concealed precious metals. I want to avoid payment of the relevant taxes and duties, and wire transfer fraud using compromised email accounts. This is all 2019 report. So I saw Shira Duncan and others jumping up and stuff like that. This is from their era. They talk about the authorities report non-cooperation by stakeholders with SOCU and lack of capacity within SOCU hinder its success at prosecutions. So people were not cooperating with SOCU. That's why they didn't get any conviction. I can go on. And so a lot of those things got brought here to the new report. Nandalal was griping a little bit about how it's unfair and all of that. For me, that's the order of the day. So I think it was a positive report when you learn to read these reports as reports that have a continuous bias. They're systemic and often written by lazy people too sometimes, because they just cut and paste. You know that well. That happens in Guyana a lot. People cut and paste a lot. So here are the sides of the report. It speaks about Guyana, the 2025 report now, the parts that they didn't highlight. Guyana has shown commitment to working with international partners to address the drug trafficking. Full stop. Right? The government collaborated with the United States to increase seizures in 2024, especially for cocaine. Guyana National Drug Strategy 2022 to 2026 provides for strategic programs to guide the country's drug control efforts with a focus on interdiction, prevention, treatment, and anti-money laundering efforts. Right? In 2024, the United States and Guyana's joint interagency task force, including its defense force, collaborated to seize 4.4 metric tons of cocaine worth approximately $195 million, I think it's US dollars, the country's largest ever drug seizure. And it goes on there. I can go on. The United States and Guyana have a strong bilateral partnership and shared concern for combating transnational crime and enhancing regional security. Those parts of the report you don't hear. Those speak about orientation of the government, the partnership. Fact is that, yeah, people, and for example, you know, it mentions in this report as a negative that some of our soldiers, in two separate incidents in July, 4 GDF officers were charged with trafficking a total of 213 kilograms of cannabis. So what did it show here? That when we find people in state agencies who are involved, they get charged. It mentions in the report too, the 200 odd charges that were Brutus, the investigation and the charges he faced. So when we find corruption, even at the highest levels in the police force, you have action taken. But imagine those 213 kilograms of cannabis. We charge our soldiers, 4 GDF officers were charged. But now we're faced with drug smuggling, cannabis coming in from the United States in the barrels here. Because they've made it, now you can smoke marijuana almost anywhere in the US. It's free. You go down Manhattan now, it's all smelling openly of marijuana. So something that we're taking enforcement action here against is now a lawful activity in parts of the United States of America to use that. And it gets smuggled through barrel, and a more potent form of marijuana now coming in through barrels into our country. We have to now deal with drug trafficking from the United States into Guyana. So a lot of these things have to be read differently, you know. But of course, Mosley and who were the others, and all of the others, the Apno and the Sherrod Duncan, etc., they thought they have nothing else to talk about. So they have to jump on this issue. They jump on the issue in Linden for a while, and then that didn't pan out the way they were trying to get the family and the others to go down a different path, which is a destructive path. And the people are sensible, and they prefer to await the investigation and ensure that a proper investigation is done. And we made it clear, if people are culpable, they will face consequences. And we have a commitment to do that. As I said before, when I sat here and spoke about Brutus, and I had to defend, they said nothing will happen with Brutus because he's close to the government. When we charged, Brutus, they took Brutus's side. But if we could do that, hold someone at that level responsible for transgression of the law, we can hold anyone, any police officer responsible for their action once it's unlawful, at any level. At any level. And that's our approach. We have credibility. Look at when Granger was selected the 4 deputies. He said he was going to select people who were unbribable. That was his word. Unbribable. There were several accusations against those individuals. They actually sent them off on leave. And what happened? They had some internal investigation and nothing came out of it. You check, just Google it, period. Google what happened there. We have great credibility in taking action against transgressors. When they, as I said before, on East Coast, when they, at Golden Grove, that young guy was killed. The policeman is in, yes, he was killed. The policeman is in the lockup now. And when the family won compensation and they wanted to appeal it, we said, no, we give the compensation. We pay the compensation out because, you know, if he lost his life and the court awarded him a sum of money, we will respect it. That is our approach. You remember the incident. It slipped me the name of the youngster who lost his life. So all week long I see them jumping up. They have nothing else to do about this report out of the U.S. We have made enormous progress in all the fronts on transparency. On the money laundering front, we have strengthened our laws. We have some great assessment from CFATF. We have worked closely with the U.S. as they put in the report themselves that we're working closely together, not just on policy, but in interdiction, and with great success. We have strengthened the anti-corruption framework. In spite of all you hear about corruption, I've explained that before, that at the central, the NPTAB, you now see every contract that has been awarded from 2021. Before that, there was a gap from 2015 to recently. Every contract there on that website, and the method of procurement, the value of the contract, and who got it. That's transparency. That's transparency. And so we have looked at. I'm very suspicious of the PNC and AFC. And nobody could blame me for being suspicious, especially as it relates to election matters. On a personal level, they're okay, but when it comes to stealing elections, they have like a real knack for doing this sort of thing. So when is the 24th? Today is the 24th? I saw something come out of GCOM, and it says here, the Guyana Elections Commission has seen evidence of the existence of a fake link purporting to be GCOM Online. GCOM Online employment recruitment portal for the upcoming general and regional elections. And the first thought that came to my head, PNC AFC. I'm very suspicious. So be careful you don't get duped and you apply to them for a job, because they will take your data, you know, or they will chase you off if they believe you're not sympathetic to them. They'll chase you off and tell you, you know, you can't get a job here. Apply to the real GCOM if you want a job there. They've outlined the authentic, the legit website, and go there. Please, don't get caught with this. Here, And they might be having a hard time getting polling agents this election, whenever they come. Because as I said before, in 2020, they said the PPP bribed all their polling agents. Remember and they changed the SOPs. So the people who work hard throw their belly for APNU and AFC then, they just dump them off. They treated them badly. They'll do the same again. So they're gonna have a hard time finding people. Maybe this is one way of trying to get people to work for them, but I don't trust the people, so I thought, let me just bring it to your attention. We have to watch carefully. And then the AFC, Kaichor News, AFC has disclosed that since their meeting with the Elections Commission, well, the headline says, GCOM implemented 2 of 26 recommendations from EU. They forgot all the changes we made to ROPA that will make the process now transparent, the entire process. Leaves no room for ambiguity, capricious decision on the part of officials of GCOM, like what Lowenfield and Mingo and the others were doing. They, from registration all the way to declaration of results, we have changed the system so that it's more transparent. And so now you know they can't decide to move polling places all around to suppress people's voters, even APNU voters. Say you want to suppress APNU's voters, you can then say, I'll move a polling place if you have to vote in South Georgetown, I'll move your polling place to Kitty, like what they tried to do in the last elections with Fowles, moving voters from Fowles to the neighboring village to vote in Paradise. That's what they tried to do. Then, even within the communities, they move it far off. So we said in the law now, it says 400 per polling place, so you have fast movement of people. For every 400 voters, you have to have a polling place. So we don't have big lines and stuff like that. And it has to be within a certain proximity of where people live. So it's comfortable, they can come out and they vote. That's what we wanted. They have to then randomly place the polling, not the polling agents, the presiding officers or election day officers. So you can't handpick a man and say, I know you're sympathetic to the APNU, so you go into this area, like you go into Dolphin School. Or so you have to randomly place people now. So you have a random system. You don't know where you're going if you're trained as a presiding officer. So if a party tries to stack up with their sympathizers to hope to use them to steal elections, they can't do that anymore because it's random placement. Thirdly, we have made it clear on the count. You have to publish the SOPs even before you start. So once the counts take place, everything has to be published online before you start tabulating at the regional level. So every Guyanese, by the night, would see the post up. They can take out their calculators. They'll calculate even before they start the regional tabulation, we would know what's going on, like the political parties knew. Like by 3 a.m. on election night, I knew we won the elections because we had our SOPs in the majority of our SOPs and where they were going to come from. We didn't have a few, but we knew where they were coming from. So a lot of those were our strongholds too. And so we knew we won the elections. And but every citizen would probably be able to know that by the following morning once it's posted online. We have to be careful. We talk to GCOM that the fake, they have to authenticate the documents that are posted, and you have to have a secure web portal or something like that to ensure that people don't try to hack the system or anything like that. Of course, you would have the manual ones, so you can't get away with it. But we have to be cautious about that, so they'd have to have strong cybersecurity to ensure that that happens. A lot of those things, they haven't seen any changes now. That's AFC and the others. The recommendations that the organizations from abroad were making historically is that we should change the model of the 331 at the commission. But that model did not create the problem. Who created the problem? It was the secretariat, the staff of the secretariat. It was the technical people who tried to steal elections in collaboration in favor of the PNC AFC, or guided by their leaders. Nigel Hughes could talk about everything else, EU recommendations, but he hasn't finished his study as yet. You remember he said he's doing a study to see if they tried to steal the elections? Up to now, he hasn't completed his study to see if they actually did try to steal the elections. He didn't know. But Pato said he had the SOPs. My boy Norton, too, all said the same. He said the same. He had the SOPs. He locked them in Congress Place away. But, of course, it was a lie. Norton is, anyhow. So they're competing. Norton and Nigel Hughes are competing to see who could be more radical. I saw they're using the unfortunate incident at the funeral there to play out their internal politics in Linden. And so that's a tragedy. They should be respectful of the people, etc. They choose to advance their own political fortunes by using the tragedy. Had nothing to do out of concern for the people there. So it's all a game for them. So I gather that reality is striking home now. I think they recognize that it's a disaster. I saw a story from last week's press conference. So I just clicked, someone sent me the story, I clicked on it. And then I look at the thread, the comments. And about 500 comments about the greed of the AFC and stuff. And then I saw some feeble Laura George went in with one comment and people gave her a telling off. But almost of the 500-600 persons who commented, you could maybe count 4 or 5 who were positive about them. And people thought it's the AFC greed and everything else, And these were their own supporters. I'm not talking about PPP supporters. PPP supporters, we don't care too much. I said here that the AFC will crawl back in. They would realize that on their own they can't do anything. They will crawl right back in. Trust me, they're going to find some way. They're going to come up with something to resume the talks. And eventually, but they will still want to share how many jobs they will get, how many boards they will control. That's what their conversation is. How many jobs, how many boards, how many CEOs of government agencies they will get, how many permanent secretaries they will get. They don't even think about, hiring permanent secretaries as politicians. Like a lot of the permanent secretaries we have now are not card-bearing members of the party. But they're already thinking about which person to put there. Like Sherrod could be, I don't know what. You can't put him anywhere near money. But you can't put Sherrod Duncan anywhere near money. I'm thinking about what? It's tough. But yeah. So that's what they're focused on. That's what you're gonna hear soon. They're back at negotiations. They're back at the table again. Quietly now, but they're still back at the table. This is gonna happen. They can't go alone. They know that. They would even make a disaster. And together, it doesn't matter. Together, it doesn't matter. And they're very concerned. They continue with this vile attack against people who have expressed support for the PPP. Suddenly, they're all sorts of things, criminals, they're everything else. When they were with them, they were church choir boys. But now, once they support the PPP, suddenly they become criminals. So it's desperation, though. It's desperation. People think it's vileness. I think it's worse. It's not. They would be vile because they're desperate. They know it's a groundswell, and there are lots of the people who are even criticizing us. There's some of them who are reaching out to us, so they know what is going to happen. Well, I don't like saying that about foreground, but it's because you have to work for everything. You have to work. Every party has to work and can't be arrogant, but they know what's going to happen. So you're going to see all sorts of things happening. I'm going to end here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. Last night, 12-year-old child lost her life at the Doubleday Hotel on the West Coast. The police...
I dealt with that matter at the beginning. You were not here. I would suggest that you listen to what I said about the police having to address that issue. They said they have a video that showed this child entering a vehicle. They gave the number of the vehicle and the make of the vehicle and its color. So if you viewed the video footage, you must release it to the people of this country. We want to see it.
Dr.
I
Jagdeo,
would like to see it.
my concern, or the people's concern, is not specifically that instance. Linden, the Henry boys, the police have been dropping the ball, and this government has been taking the brunt of the attack for continued failures by the police. When will this government deal with the reforming of the Guyana Police Force, and will that be one of the commitments for the elections coming?
I dealt with the issue at the beginning. I made it clear that if we could have, right here, we were told by the AFC and the PNC that Brutus is an untouchable. Brutus is an untouchable. Nigel Hughes called for international inquiry. He said Soku could not do a professional job. The Ramjatan made the same sort of statement. Mr. Norton and the PNC did the same thing. We took it seriously. There was a Soku investigation. He was charged, 200 odd charges, over 230 charges were laid against Brutus. He was one of the highest ranking officers in the police force to face those charges. And in fact, maybe the most charges anywhere. We have demonstrated in every case that we're prepared to do impartial investigations, and whenever there is a transgression and they break the law, we're prepared to take action against the transgressor, whoever that person is. We have great credibility in doing that. So I can't promise you today that there would be no incident in the future. I can't promise that. How could any politician promise that a policeman who is now located in Madhya will not treat people unfairly, or a policeman on the road will not try to solicit a bribe from somebody who is speeding? That's why we're putting in security cameras. But how can I promise that, or any politician? But the only thing you can promise is that if you find the act, an illegal act, is to take action against it. But you can't promise to stop it. How will we promise to stop? Nobody is in the mindset of everybody. You think we would have known that the 4 GDF officers who were smuggling the marijuana, the chief of staff or Irfan Ali as commander-in-chief or anyone or his commanding officers would have known that. They would not. If they, by its very nature, they would do it secretly. So, but when they were caught, and we showed, we had the balls to really deal with it, to charge them. Unlike what happened in the past, unlike what happened in, that's what I was explaining. We had the courage to deal with it. So that is what we promise all the time. We can promise. But there are many, many good people in the police force and in the army and in the security services too. And so whilst we go after the people who are breaking the law, we must also give full support to those who do their work honestly and with diligence.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Sharvin Belgrave with Kaiser News. The IMF oil price revision suggested low revenue for Guyana than was projected before in 2025. And it noted that the oil price dropped from January to now by 4-point-something%. I think it's 4.04%. With this trend, is this a worry? Is this something that the government will take with the 7th and 8th project coming on stream when assessing to see if we can get some more fiscal benefits? And is Guyana still safe, in a safe position without ring fencing? And if why, what is the guarantee for future projects?
You know, you're wearing my patience thin, because every week I've been answering this question about oil prices. And so let me quickly go through this again. The numbers I said to you even last week or the week before, I said to you when these projects were launched, the price was around that was bandied about was $50 per barrel. The price is, with that, at $50 a barrel, if your break-even cost is between 25 to 35, depending on which project, it was a feasible venture. The prices went up all the way to $100. They're in their $60-something range now. So yes, it affects naturally. If the prices fall, they would affect the quantum of revenue that you will get. But when they rose also from the past, they increased the amount of money available to us too, not just as revenue, but they allowed us, that increase allowed us to accelerate the amortization of the investments. So I explained this at great length. I don't want to go back through that again. So what's your point? Yes, oil prices go up and down from time to time, but tomorrow something happens and then it could go back again. So what are you trying really to get at? I don't understand.
I know you said that the oil prices fluctuate, but recently it has been going down, and it's looking worrying with the situation right in the market.
Yeah.
It's in the 60s, 65, 66.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It was 61. It was 61 2 weeks ago. Went up, back again. It fluctuates. So what's the point? That's how markets work. What's the point?
If government is taking the trend seriously, or they're worried, or they're safe.
Of course, every day we watch this. But I told you already, I outlined all the consequences of moving oil prices for the amortization of the investment, for the fiscal flow, right, to the treasury, and for viability. All of these three things I dealt with in the past. So I can't keep repeating those over and over again, because I've dealt with how the movement in oil prices affect these three fundamental variables already. It's just that I don't know. I know you have to look for a headline from the Kaichor News. Glenn Lyle must be looking there. Our president, future president. I saw he said he'll be the president too. Boy, there are a lot of madmen in this country. Anyhow, so the thing is that I don't know what you're trying to get at. If you ask me, yeah, prices come up, and quoting the IMF doesn't add a new dimension to the argument. The argument was oil prices fluctuate and they have consequences for various variables, and we are examining all of these.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Secondly, the recent report from the U.S. on the narcotics and drug control, there was a section that says that in addition to corruption in the police force, that poverty and low-paying jobs is contributing to drug trade. Do you agree with the U.S. report, and what?
Yeah, I dealt with that, the same point from 2019, the same thing about wages and salaries, they said. It's cut and paste from 2019. The thing is that, personally, I don't believe that when you deal with drug dealers, wages and salaries have anything to do with them. Because if that was true, some of the wealthiest people would be the cleanest people in the country. Because they're wealthy, that means they don't need to do illegal things. It's not correlated. Some wealthy people become wealthy, and they continue to do because of illegal activities, and they continue to grow their wealth because of illegal activities. So in the United States of America, where the salaries are substantially higher for customs officers and immigration officers, you think you don't have corruption among them? So what would they say there? Right here, we had a man who was found by the US government, who was well paid, he was working in the embassy, who was in a visa racket with the locals. You remember the past, right? I remember some Carol or something. I think that was his name. Right here. What do they say about that? The United States of America, substantial amount of drugs go into the US. President Trump has made it his, almost through the campaign, etc., spoke about fentanyl getting into the US, killing a lot of people. But how does it get into the US? It breaches their borders too. With all the law enforcement that they have, it gets into the United States by breaching their borders. So we can say that the biggest failure of law enforcement is in the United States, because with the volume of drug that get in there to create this, what the Republicans and President Trump has called an epidemic of deaths associated with illegal drug coming in from Mexico and other places. How does that happen? It's a failure of law enforcement, we could say that. So people have to examine these things. This self-flagellation doesn't work. And so it works well for Kaichor News that looks for a headline and try to blame us for everything. But it doesn't, having had a longer view of these matters, and I've dealt with this, I spoke with several, President Bush, and also Obama and Hillary Clinton right in Trinidad and Tobago, talking about the very same issues. So we've been at this a long time.
My third question and final question. I know the world as a whole is battling global warming, but every time it rains, parts of Guyana and even the city gets floods. Is the PP government working on any long-term solution? Or let's say we know that you can't avoid certain things, but just to prevent these flash floods that are affecting persons.
So you can't link global warming with the failures of the city councilman here in Guyana. Oh God, how is like Glenn Lal saying global warming is because Exxon throwing hot water in the ocean? Global warming is a consequence of the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So here, suddenly, if you get a flood in your yard, it's global warming. The thing is, clearly now, we have a changed weather pattern, if that's what you're getting at. So you can have more water now in shorter periods. That's what I was trying to explain to people, why we need to build a capacity to pump the water out, because you can't wait on gravity flow. So when Georgetown was designed, it was designed for like 2 inches of rainfall in the colonial era in 24 hours. That's what I'm told. And that is with gravity flow. At that time, Main Street, where you see the boulevard, the walkway, that was a canal. Where on Camp Street, those were canals. They were not like the footpath that you have there. They were big canals. So we had storage in that area. So we've been filling up these canals and reducing storage between the tides. So you can store the water, and then when the tide shifts, the water goes out naturally through gravity flow. We're filling these up all the time historically for the last maybe 50 or 100 years. So our storage is reduced. And on top of that now, the rainfall that you got in the past, that you will get 2 inches in 24 hours we can handle, but you can get maybe 8 inches in a single night. So if that happens, it will create major problems. The water has to accumulate. It can't flow out, so it accumulates, and therefore you have to pump it. And then even when you try to drain the water, because so many internal drains are blocked up, you can't, the water doesn't flow easily out. So you may have the drainage canal low, that is the major drainage canal low, but then the distribution canals still fill with water. That's why we're putting in this, the pump that we built at Lilendal can help to pump out more water faster. It will bring major relief to South Georgetown, that's connected with that big canal, places like Sophia and Lilendal and all those places. It brings a big difference there. The pump station that just completed by Lilendal there. So we double the capacity to pump water out. So we are preparing for that, but you got to talk to Glenn Lal about this global warming business. I got to talk to him. It's not so simple that every time rainfall is global warming. Historically, we have had that even before, a long time. You grow up in the area, the people don't clean the drain, water accumulates in your yard. Not global warming for everything. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Anna Williams, Culture News. Sir, now that you and your party are preparing to ask the electorate for a renewed mandate, can you say in your more than 30 years in politics, what policy or project you are most proud of, and how has it benefited the citizens of Guyana?
Well, the project to restore Guyana from bankruptcy to economic viability. One project. Forget all of the other roads and power and hospitals and school. And it's often a project that people don't pay attention to. So tomorrow I'll be at the convention center. I think the Economic Society from UG asked me to meet with young people there. And I saw they changed the topic a bit, but it doesn't matter. I'll deal with that. But I wanted to talk a bit about the economic history of this country, because people need to know that. So if you look at McIntyre's report, as I said before, the starting point was 1990. That report came in 1990. I wish, maybe the next time, next Thursday, I'll read you excerpts of the report, because when he came here, he was the Secretary General of CARICOM, then advisor, then he was the good officer for Guyana for a long time in the Venezuela dispute. Respected Caribbean economist, leader, etc. The report was a damning one. It said we are below Haiti, but it tells you about the debt. He said the debt was 7 times the export figure of Guyana. And then the arrears on the debt was another 4 times the export value of Guyana. So imagine with the debt and the export arrears, it was 11 times the value of our export. That was 1990, that report came out. The PPP took office, remember, Desmond Hoyt was supposed to hold elections in 1990, 85 to 90. He got another 2 years because there were already the voters list, etc. We were fighting for elections. Got 7 years. That's what we took over. I was in the finance ministry then. I know we couldn't find money to pay wages and salaries. Debts. You couldn't find money to pay debts, much less wages and salaries. By the time the people left in 2011, November 2011, the country's finances had substantially changed. By 2015, when the PPP left office, we brought the debt down from 900% of GDP down to 45% of GDP. One of the lowest figures in the world pre-oil. Pre-oil. So that's an important point to make. It's pre-oil. And servicing of that debt down from over 100% of revenue to 10% of revenue. One of the lowest figures in the region too. That's insolvency. You can't, we couldn't, the reason we went to the IMF is because we were bankrupt. Nobody was lending us. I read you the excerpts and you will see what the inflation figure was. The fiscal deficit was 51% of GDP. So that meant every 2 years, if you borrowed, you were doubling the debt just to finance the fiscal deficit. Right? Every 2 years you were doubling that. And it all came about by printing money. They were financing the deficit by printing money. That was the state in 1990. What's the deficit now? Less than 10% of GDP, the fiscal deficit. The BOP deficit was maybe 47% of GDP. Now, we get in trouble with the US because we run a trade surplus with the US. So, we have a balance of payment surplus now. So that's, if you ask me about that, but of course, Kaichor News will not write that. People hardly write about that. That's because of hard work over many years. So my record, going through those tough years when we didn't have money, and we had all the demands, and we had APNU on the street burning things, and supporting criminals and everything else, we've struggled through all of that and change the country. Bankruptcy to the most dynamic economy in today, well, even before oil, in the region, and today the fastest growing economy in the world. That's where we are. And PPP stewardship. PPP stewardship. And along the way, we dealt with education, healthcare, we expanded, even whilst paying back the debt and getting the write-off. Tough road, It was a tough road. Now it looks easier because we have some more money. But it was tough all along the way. And so I don't want to go into what project I work on, a project. You remember the Marriott that Glenn Lal said? I own the Marriott. Up till now he keeps saying this, I own the Marriott. This delusional guy. And you could check, even APNU doesn't say that nonsense. Because they were in office and they know. You were saying they said they would turn it into a hospital. They were opposed to that. They were opposed to the stadium. They were opposed to the Burbage Bridge when we built that. They were opposed to the convention center. They were opposed to CARICOM headquarters. All those things in the years when we didn't have all the money, but we pursued them. We built them. They killed their miler when we did it. They were opposed to the one laptop per family. Remember, they discontinued it when we started giving the laptop out to people. I went there, Secure people asked again, can we, and that's one of the suggestions we got, by the way, can we return to that, a laptop per family, or to get more people with instruments. So I can enumerate 100 things, but the key thing was economic viability. Went from a bankrupt country to economic viability. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you.